What does I mean? It means to love. Hey everyone, Templar74 here with another Yu-Gi-Oh video, and today's Yu-Gi-Oh video is going to be my thoughts and impressions regarding the latest episode of Yu-Gi-Oh VRAINS, episode 120, A Connected World, and the series finale of Yu-Gi-Oh VRAINS. And I gotta be honest with you guys, when this episode first came out, I was a little hesitant to actually watch it, just because VRAINS has been a great series in my opinion. It's been really well done, and I was afraid that they were going to completely drop the ball on the ending, kind of like what they did with Arc 5, but thankfully that didn't happen. VRAINS has been a great series, and it actually got a pretty decent ending for what it was, and by Yu-Gi-Oh standards, it really did get what my definition would be of a fairly decent ending. And also the episode here, the episode was great. It hit on all the boxes. It checked all the boxes. It was a great ending to a series all the way around. This is how a series finale should be handled in Yu-Gi-Oh, in my opinion. But we'll talk about all of this soon enough. So, at risk of further rambling, let's move on to the actual episode. So the episode begins with Playmaker declining Ai's proposal to fuse and become one, and it's because Playmaker tells Ai, you only have one life, one consciousness, and if they fused together, they wouldn't be themselves anymore. And then he goes on to tell Ai that life has no solutions. Understatement of the year, Playmaker. And then we also learn from Playmaker that it's the bonds that you develop during that journey of life that allow you to grow stronger and move on, and those bonds are what moves us forward. It was just a very emotional and touching speech from Playmaker here to Ai, who's in the middle of his rebellion here. However, Ai is still determined that he does not want to do all this work. He's already made up his mind on what path he's going to take and what path Playmaker is going to take, and at this point there's nothing that they can do to take one another off of their respective paths. And with that, Ai continues the duel with Ai playing the trap card IQ, and what this does is it prevents Playmaker, or actually limits Playmaker would be a better definition to put it. It basically limits Playmaker to the point where he can only do one link summon per turn. So now Playmaker has his hands completely locked up. He has 0 cards in his hand. He can only link summon once. This draw is going to determine everything, and it's going to determine the fate of Playmaker. And Playmaker actually pulls off a pretty incredible comeback here as he link summons his final link monster in the extra deck. It wasn't Firewall Dragon, by the way, because I had actually posted this question on Twitter whether I thought, okay, Playmaker had used 14 out of the 15 extra deck cards. What could the 15th one be? And I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, maybe it could be Firewall Dragon, but it turns out that didn't happen. His last link monster is none other than Access Code Talker. It's a Link 4, and this monster is just incredible. The summoning animation was great. He even used Dark Fluid to link summon this thing, so that should tell you everything you want to know about this monster being the one that's going to ultimately come down and take down the Arrival, considering that Playmaker's strongest monster, Dark Fluid, couldn't do it. So anyway, now with Access Code Talker on the field, he manages to wipe Ai's field clean and even defeats the Arrival in a double knockout. So Access Code Talker's defeated, but also the Arrival is defeated, and it's at this point Ai is able to revive Dark Knight at Ignister, and now Ai is the only one with a monster left on his field because Access Code Talker was destroyed. So Playmaker has his back against the wall here. Ai has Dark Knight on his field. Playmaker has nothing, and it's at this moment Playmaker moves in undeterred. He moves forward by using a card that he banished earlier on in the duel when he used Signet Closure, and we learned that that trap card that he banished face down was none other than Recoded Alive. He's able to use it to bring back Decode Talker, and it's very fitting that Decode Talker be the one to come back and ultimately finish Ai off. And it's at this point Playmaker moves in for the attack, and at first it appears that Dark Knight is going to end up coming out on top because it cannot be destroyed in battle by a monster with the same number of attack points. However, thanks to Signet Closure, Playmaker is able to give Decode Talker an attack point boost and ultimately defeat Dark Knight, and Ai ultimately losing the duel. And now with Ai's defeat, we see Playmaker frantically running up to Ai to make sure he's alright, and of course we know what's going to happen at this point. But this is where Playmaker and Ai get to say their final goodbyes but not before Playmaker asks Ai a very simple question, and it's something he asked him during the duel as well, and that is, did you run a simulation of this duel? And Ai just simply responds, no, I didn't run a simulation of this duel. That would be lame. So I went into this not knowing exactly what was going to happen. I think he knew deep down in his heart that Playmaker was going to win and he was going to lose, but at the same time, he had no guarantees of that. And it's also at this point that Ai asks Playmaker a question here, and that question is none other than, was I a good partner? And then we get this whole flashback of Playmaker and Ai's adventure throughout Vrains here against the Hanoi, against Zyzen, against Bowman, against all odds here. And it's as this flashback is going on, Playmaker finally breaks down, he starts crying, and he tells Ai that yes, he was the best partner ever. It's about time Yusaku or Playmaker finally started showing some emotion in this series. It had to happen at the very end, but I'm ultimately happy that we finally got an emotional moment out of Playmaker, and he's not just an emotional robot like fan theories had suggested. He does have emotion here, and he really did care for Ai. And this whole moment here, the music that's playing in the background, it just really pulled at the feels. I was bawling when I saw this part of the episode. But even with that, now we've got one more question from Ai before he vanishes to Playmaker, and that question is, Playmaker lazily gave him the nickname Ai. What do you think Ai means? And it's at this point Playmaker answers his question, and he says that Ai means to love. And ultimately this answer is satisfactory to Ai as he closes his eyes, tears rolling down his eyes as he says, I think so too. And it's at this moment he gives back what he stole as promised, which of course is the consciousness and the lives of all of his victims on his rebellion spree here. And as these lives disappear up into the horizon, we watch Ai ultimately vanish from existence. He goes extinct, he vanishes from existence, and Playmaker is transported back to Soltech's factory with the lifeless Ai Soltis as it falls down this catwalk and down into these various Ai copies that Ai had produced, and they're all down on the ground, and Yusaku actually runs after Ai Soltis. He jumps off the catwalk after it, and when they land on the ground, he's holding the Ai Soltis, and he's actually crying out into the sunset of Ai. He can't believe that he did that. And now that Ai is gone, we see Playmaker have one emotional goodbye and one torn journey now that his best partner ever is gone. It's also interesting to note that during this entire goodbye sequence here, Playmaker ultimately assures Ai that he will never be forgotten, because even Ai said before he disappeared that people would forget about him eventually, and Playmaker said, no, I'm never going to forget about you. And even in the real world, he followed through with that as he fell down off this catwalk after the Soltis, the lifeless Soltis that Ai had left behind. And it's at this moment here we get the big final of Vrains. And that is a time skip 3 months into the future. And this is where I say Vrains exceeded the Arc 5 finale by leaps and bounds, because the Arc 5 finale, we just got a tease that Yuya was going to play against his father, or finally duel against his father, and that's all we got. Here we actually did get some real conclusions in a time skip 3 months later, and during that time skip we learn all kinds of interesting things on where everybody's lives have gone. We learn that Jin is now fully feeling recovered, he's forgotten about the lost incident, and he's now working with Kusanagi at the hot dog truck. And it's also here that we see Aoi visiting Kusanagi here and basically saying, I'm glad that your brother is back to normal. And when Kusanagi tries to tell Aoi that it was thanks to her and the others, Aoi just refuses to take the credit. She's like, no, it wasn't me, it was the others, I didn't do anything. So a real grown-up moment here from Aoi. And Aoi also asks an ultimate question to Kusanagi, have you heard from Playmaker? And he's like, no, nobody's heard from Playmaker, but he'll be back. And it's at this point we learn that during this 3-month time skip, the entire time Playmaker has been on a hiatus. He has not been seen since the final duel with Ai, for various good reasons, I'm sure, because that duel against Ai really hit him hard, and that also helped build up this episode, in my opinion. So then we see that. Next we go to Zyzen, who is now the Soul Technology CEO. He's been promoted. He now outranks Queen. He is now the CEO of Soul Tech. And we also learn that Linked Vrains connects not just all networks, but all worlds in the virtual reality. So Vrains has gotten bigger and better and more complex than ever, and it's growing by the day. And in this new Linked Vrains, we have some protectorates. We have Blood Shepherd and Ghost Girl, who are now working together to protect Linked Vrains and hunting these monsters out in the Badlands together, which is really interesting here. We learn that Go is now a champion inside Linked Vrains, and we even get a little bit of a conclusion on a mystery revolving Tekeru and his friend Kiku back in his hometown. We learn that they are now actually a thing, and Tekeru takes Kiku to Linked Vrains as Soul Burner, and we also hear him basically tell Kiku, when she says to him, "You are so cool," he's like, "No, there's somebody here that's cooler than me." Obviously, he's talking about Playmaker. And he does something very interesting here. He promises to Kiku that when Playmaker returns, he will introduce her to him. So I think that's really interesting here, because Playmaker has always been Soul Burner or Tekeru's hero. And the fact that he's promising to basically show off his girlfriend to Playmaker at some point, that was really interesting to see as well. And then, of course, we have Brave Max. No one cares about him. Yeah, nobody cares about him, so I'm not even going to go there. We do see that annoying character one more time. And then we move on to Spectre and the Knights of Hanoi. We learn that Knights of Hanoi are abiding by Soul Burner's request and Revolver's promise to look over the network, to watch out for the network, to atone for their crimes. The Knights of Hanoi are out in the real world, but they are observing Linked Vrains, they're monitoring it, and they are intervening when it is necessary. And then we go back to Revolver and Spectre, who are the only ones inside Linked Vrains at the moment, and Spectre asks the obvious question that's on everybody's minds: will Playmaker return? To which Revolver just smiles as he looks up and he's like, yes, Playmaker will return, and he will return stronger than ever. And it's at this point Playmaker comes back from his hiatus as he logs into the Vrains for the first time in 3 months since Ai's defeat. And then we get a little bit of a shocker at the very end here. Just as the episode is wrapping up, we see Ai reviving. Question mark, question mark, question mark. That's a little... we're never going to see that, but it's a nice little hint that, hey, something could go on with Vrains later on in the future, maybe in the manga, because we're never probably going to get a sequel to Yu-Gi-Oh Vrains, which is a shame because this series was cut so short. And that's where the episode concludes, but not without one more hint of Yu-Gi-Oh 7. We got a little tease of it. No name of the anime. We just saw that Yu-Gi-Oh 7 will air in 2020, which means Yu-Gi-Oh is done with production of Yu-Gi-Oh Vrains, and Yu-Gi-Oh 7 is in production right now, and it will be out in 2020. And that was the series finale of Yu-Gi-Oh Vrains. And again, everybody, it's just hard for me to believe that Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is already over. At 120 episodes, it was just a gut check. At 120 episodes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is the shortest Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime in Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise history. I thought for sure we were going to get another 6 or 7 months of this show, so the fact that they just cut it off like that right at the knees was kind of it was disappointing to me, because I'm one of those people that loved Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. I think that it was one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh! Series we've had in a long time. I think it's definitely better than Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, and I really do think it's better than Zexal. I think that it's been since Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds that we've had such a mature series, and it really fell through. I mean, there were a lot of great things in this series, a lot of things that were well done. The animation was great, musical selection was great, the cast choices were spot on. They really became one with their characters. Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains did have kind of a repetition problem there. It just kind of followed the same formula, and it did have quite a affinity with recap episodes. But other than that, it was a really great series. I think it was really well written too, and its ending really suited the show. I mean, the ending was arguably one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh! Endings we've had in a long time. So while Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains had its problems, I really think that it's one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh! Series we've had in a really long time, in my opinion. And the fact that it was just cut off at 120 episodes just really was a gut check. But the way they wrote it off, I got to admit, I'm happy with it, even though Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains ended, in my opinion, 6 months too soon. it was well done in my opinion, and it's been a great show. It's been a great ride, and now we've got this time in between Yu-Gi-Oh series. I'm really looking forward to going back and reliving the Yu-Gi-Oh VRAINS adventure all over again, and this is the first time that I've actually gone back and started rewatching a Yu-Gi-Oh series. So yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh VRAINS, gotta hand it to you. It was a wild ride. It was a great ride. Thank you for everything. Overall, I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. It was a great wrap up to a great series in my opinion, and I really suggest we check this episode out, or you guys check this episode out when you get the chance. It was really well worth the watch in my opinion. But as always, in the comments section down below, let me know what your guys' thoughts were about this. What were your guys' thoughts on Yu-Gi-Oh VRAINS as a whole? What were your thoughts on the finale? Just let me know what your guys' thoughts are about all this in the comments section down below, because as always, I enjoy hearing from you. Alright everyone, as always, Templar74 signing off. Have a great day everybody, and I'll talk to you all next time. Goodbye everybody.